Daryl and Dante Sutorius personify happiness and success.
She loved the idea of being able to present herself as a doctor's wife.
He treated her like a queen.
Behind closed doors, however, the new couple hides dark secrets.
She was scared of him because he was bigger than her.
In between the mattress and the box springs, we found a pair of steak knives.
Love may be blind and marriage bliss, but divorce is murder. 6 months after a painful divorce, respected heart surgeon, 55-year-old Daryl Sutorius, decides to give love a second chance by enrolling in a Cincinnati dating service.
He had joined that dating group, and he liked ladies, and he liked to be social with them.
Daryl's friends were very much encouraging him to get back out there, find somebody new, dust yourself off, pick yourself up. You're a great guy, and you deserve to have somebody who loves you.
Darryl is determined to find a new mate, but can't seem to meet anyone compatible.
Darryl wasn't the cutest guy in the world, and there were a lot of young ladies who would, want to go out with him simply because he was a doctor, because he probably had money, and because he could take them to the kind of places they'd want to go. Some young gal would show up with him at some function or something like that.
After a year of unsuccessful dates, he stumbles upon the profile of 45-year-old divorcee, Dante Britton.
Dante was the perfect little petite blonde with the right body and the right outfit. She was a graduate of UCLA, she was an expert in art, she was all of these things that a dilettante would be, very highly sophisticated woman who, she knew the world.
They seem to have much in common. Both are divorced, and both have children from a previous troubled marriage.
Well, Darryl had talked about her being very social, and she was very good looking, and she had dated several prominent people around Cincinnati. Obviously, he was intrigued.
When Darryl met her, here's this woman who, is enthralled with him and what a great man he is and what a big surgeon he is.
Darryl and Dante are convinced that at last they've found the perfect mate in each other.
Darryl described her as being very, very petite and very pretty and very sophisticated, and he was enamored with her, totally enamored with her. I guess that meant a lot to him, that he was going to have this a queen on his arm, and people would admire him for having that. It was all beautiful, wonderful, everything's great, she understands me,
She loved the idea of being able to present herself as a doctor's wife. She really played up being the wife of a thoracic surgeon.
She's the kind of woman who looked good in a bikini, even at her age.
She seemed like a very nice, classy lady. She would be dressed in her furs and her jewelry. She believed in taking care of herself, and I hate to use the terms high maintenance, but she was high maintenance. She'd get her makeup and her hair done.
Darryl woos her lavishly.
He was showering her with gifts, with furs, with cars.
He treated her like a queen.
The couple is smitten with each other. It looks like they have a real chance at making their relationship work this time round.
I thought they were a very nice-looking couple. We saw them together at the theater and, enjoying life.
To his friends, it seemed like Darryl found the perfect mate. It was, hey, he's happy, she's pretty, he's got what he wanted. He's off and running into a new life.
Just 4 months after Darryl meets Dante, he proposes to her. A week later, they get married on March 2nd, 1995. His friends are surprised by the hasty nuptials.
In fact, when he told me he was going to get married, I almost missed it. It was just kind of in passing. What do you mean you're going to get married? Yeah, we're going to get married. Well, oh, really? It was like, geez, today the day Darryl said he was going to get married? And I don't know. It was not really, he told me he was getting married by a justice of the peace over in Newport. And he got married over at some storefront, and that was it. Nobody was there. We weren't there. I think he just wanted to get it over with and get going.
Forensic psychologist Brian Russell and psychotherapist Stacy Kaiser think that Dante and Darryl are rushing into things.
Dante sees Daryl's profile online and is immediately attracted. He's a surgeon, he's successful. Darryl was looking for a beautiful woman, and he found her. Dante certainly seemed like she had all of the right makings. There was no point in delving any further.
I think that Darryl may have wanted to convince the outside world and also himself that he was better off after his divorce. And so the idea that he had come out better off, I think may have motivated him to look for some superficial qualities.
Wanting to impress his new wife, Darryl makes a big move.
She wanted a home, so he agreed, yeah, we can go get a home. It was a nice home, from what I could tell.
The house they bought was modern and sophisticated. The neighborhood they moved into is considered to be one of the best neighborhoods in Cincinnati.
Here we go.
Daryl's daughter, Deborah, trying to be supportive of her father's new relationship, helps with the move and makes a startling discovery in Dante's boxes.
She finds a collection of hair pieces and hair extensions and fake fingernails, all kinds of, and stuff that Dante was buying through television, like through QVC and other television, ordering things through the TV. So Dante seemed, in Deborah's eyes, to be somebody suddenly to be put together with glue.
Several months later, Deborah is further unsettled by the fact that the master bedroom is a mess, and Dante still has not unpacked any of her boxes.
So there's all these boxes that are still taped up. Most of Dante's things are in boxes, and immediately, Deborah, being an intelligent young woman, is like, wait a minute here. So this woman hasn't really moved into her own home.
There's also the small matter of the prenuptial agreement that Dante has refused to sign.
He tried to set up paperwork so that she could not have access to all of his monies should anything happen to him. And you know what Dante did? She insisted if he was going to use any paperwork that was going to preclude her from having total access to his money, she wouldn't marry him. And she got her way.
Darryl brushes aside her quirks.
He had been so unhappy with the other marriage. He was going from a bad situation to a great situation.
Darryl had turned his life around. He had this new woman, things were great. They were redecorating the house, things were happy. Things were plush for the Sutorious household.
But after several months of marital bliss, things unravel when Dante discovers that Darryl has serious financial problems because of his divorce.
Darryl had to give his first wife a lot of his assets. I think she got the house and whatever kind of alimony. It was substantial. And it created a lot of bitterness between the two of them forevermore.
You better freaking take care of
Dante feels that Darryl has misled her about his financial situation, and she no longer knows what to believe. The arguments get worse, and Dante moves into another bedroom, while Darryl moves his stuff to the basement. He worries that he might already be headed for another divorce. Dante is alarmed by Darryl's volatile moods. She tells her sister Donna that Darryl is seeing a psychiatrist and is on antidepressants.
She was saying she was concerned because he was depressed. Dante did tell me that she had put a lock on her door because she didn't know what he was going to do.
She believed that Darryl was, having psychological issues, that he needed help, that she was in jeopardy somehow by living with this man under the same roof.
For his part, Darryl worries that Dante is keeping something from him.
He had told me about her. She had locks on her door. He kind of talked to me a little bit that things weren't going as well as there was problems. It just really was getting ugly real quick. And this was in the first year of marriage.
But it's not unusual for Darryl to worry.
You had to understand Darryl. Darryl always felt like that. Everything, the world was always coming to an end, in at least a week or so. But no more than usual. I mean, he was like that little comic strip character that goes around with a cloud over his head. That's the way Darryl was.
Before long, Darryl and Dante are living as total strangers.
They were just occupying the house, and they would pass like 2 ships in the night, and they were not communicating. And so, other than curse words and stuff like that.
When you haven't taken the time to really get to know each other, like Dante and Darryl, then little things can easily rattle that foundation. This does seep into other areas of the relationship because it makes a person wonder, what else don't I know? What else might happen? What else might get uncovered?
And soon, the tension will ratchet up.
She just felt that she had reason to fear him.
The Sutorious couple appears to have it all. Darryl is a top heart surgeon in Cincinnati, and Dante, a stunning divorcee. But by early December, 9 months after they get married, the situation gets tense when Darryl tells his wife that despite his financial problems, he wants to foot the bill for his daughter Deborah's wedding in June.
I thought we talked about this already.
Dante was furious that Darryl wanted to pay for his daughter's wedding.
Dante was giving him all kinds of trouble about that.
Might well pay for her own wedding for Christ's sake.
He was, oh my God, I want to give her some money, but she don't want me to give her any money.
Darryl's daughter Deborah is furious with Dante and lashes out at her.
At some point, Deborah calls Dante to say, what are you doing? Why are you giving us such a hard time? You don't know our family. You don't realize, this is important to my father to walk me down the aisle and to be a part of my wedding and to pay for my wedding. And Dante gets outraged and spits out, "You don't realize you're not getting a penny. I'm married to him. I'm married to him now." And she's repeating it.
It has to be really challenging for Daryl's daughter to accept that his father ran out, met a woman, and married her very quickly. Add to it that she's now hearing that her new stepmother doesn't want her father to spend money on her wedding, and the anger could really escalate.
Dante tells friends and family that Daryl's financial troubles have not only made him depressed, but that he is behaving erratically towards her.
Dante said that she had to lock herself in her room because she didn't know what he would do. She just felt that she had reason to fear him.
She had knives that she was ready to use at any given moment to protect herself from Darryl. She believed that Darryl was, having psychological issues, that he needed help, that she was in jeopardy somehow by living with this man under the same roof.
She was scared of him because he was bigger than her. You know, you got this 6-foot some guy and then this little tiny frail woman. And he would come home late some nights and she didn't know where he'd been.
Darryl is known for his difficult personality and imposing physique.
He was a huge man. I don't know, 6'6", maybe 280, 300 pounds. He was a big guy, and but huge hands. He wore a size 10 surgical glove. They said that he was really a tyrant in the operating. Everything had to be perfection, and he evidently made some real enemies in the operating room and around his professional life. But that was the way he was. He demanded perfection. But he was like, I don't know, he was two different people. And some people tried to identify him as that tyrant and as that bully.
In late December 1995, the marriage comes to a breaking point after a particularly nasty fight when Dante shows him that she has a gun. Dante claims that she needs it for protection from Darryl. Darryl is afraid.
It was hard to believe that anybody that big and strong and imposing would be afraid of this. I mean, she was just a tiny little thing. You know, having known Darryl as well as I do, you know, he's always afraid of imminent doom and all this and that and the other thing, and you tend to dismiss some of that. What I said to him at that point was, you know, you make it awful hard to be your friend, don't you, Darryl?
No one knows what is going on.
There was so much chaos in the house that both of them were describing these weird and horrible scenes that they were living through together in the house. It seemed like both of them were exaggerating.
Darryl himself has anger management issues. He has a history of having a bad temper. He's a big guy. It's really hard to believe that someone like him would not only stay with a woman like this, but would be so afraid. And so I think it makes people wonder if it's all for show. Is Darryl trying to get attention? Is he trying to make people hate his wife? Like, why would he be doing something like this?
It's hard to know the truth of what's happening under somebody's roof based upon what either partner tells about it. I think that usually there is some truth that lies in the middle that gets very difficult to sort out until afterwards.
Darryl contacts his lawyer to take a look at his options. However, he is reluctant to have this marriage end so quickly, especially with no prenup signed.
He did not want this to end because of what he's going to look like second time around. He didn't want to look like a fool. He didn't want to look like, he didn't want to lose some more money.
There would probably also be a huge element of him sort of losing face if the relationship were to fail this quickly.
He doesn't want to be a 2-time divorcee, and so he's going to try and do everything he can to keep this marriage going.
Probably caused him to really have some trepidation about moving in either direction, and when people have that trepidation, they tend to stay stagnant.
But while he refuses to act, Darryl becomes increasingly paranoid, convinced that his wife is plotting against him.
He also was wearing a bulletproof vest to perform surgery at the hospital.
The Sutorious marriage is rapidly disintegrating, and their upscale home has become a combat zone. Darryl is worried that his new wife is keeping a secret hidden behind her locked door.
Well, the way he described it to me was, he said, I had a couple of scotches one night, got up my nerve, and went up and busted the door in, and went in and looked around and found this gun.
Darryl decides to get rid of it.
He was in the gas station and he saw this cop there, and he goes over to the cop and tells him his story and gives the cop the gun, and evidently the cop made him feel stupid because the cop told him something like, What, a big guy like you, afraid of some little woman with a gun? And I said, I don't know about that, Daryl. But so that made him feel, again, a little inadequate in this situation.
Finding the gun in Dante's room makes Daryl's imagination run wild and unleashes his worst fears. He continues to live in the house, however, but takes precautionary measures. And he realizes he knows very little about his new wife.
He resorted to propping a chair up against the bedroom door so that she couldn't break into his bedroom. He also was wearing a bulletproof vest to perform surgery at the hospital, because operations happen at all times of the day and night. So you have to be able to have that place to go home to rest. He knew that there would be times where he'd have to return to home.
It was a horrible, dead zone, and he was afraid for his life. I know that he was scared being there. I can't imagine what it would be like.
Worried that his paranoia is spiraling, Darryl decides to find out more about the woman he's living with.
Daryl calls and gets a hold of Dante's mother and is hoping that he's going to hear good news, like that, geez, Dante isn't bad and it's all going to be okay.
Daryl actually contacted my mother, and I imagine it was kind of like a last straw because he didn't know where to turn. But I think to call my mother would have been really reaching out for help, because who knows a child better than their mother?
To Daryl's horror, he discovers that everything Dante has told him is a lie. Dante's mother informs Daryl that his wife was already married and divorced in her early 20s, that she gave up a daughter, and that Dante is not even her real name.
He hears from Dante's mother about her transforming herself from Della into Dante. This woman's real name was Della. She was never Dante.
Daryl also discovers that she has not one, but 4 ex-husbands, and that her relationships ended violently.
He discovered that she threatened one of the husbands with a gun. He discovered that she burned someone's house down, allegedly, and he discovered that she had threatened another husband with a knife. I mean, this is serious stuff. And Daryl started to realize that he's married to a monster.
One of Dante's exes claims that she lit his bed on fire while he was sleeping.
She had this boyfriend who wouldn't come home on time. He liked to go out with his friends and drink. So she said she was going to fix him. And she said she was going to soak his bed in kerosene or gasoline. And she said he always comes home, lights a cigarette, and falls out in the bed. And she said, and with the mattress soaked with kerosene or gasoline, that would just make the bed go up in flames. Then a few days later, when she talks to me, she tells me that he came home, he got in bed, but for some reason, he didn't light a cigarette this night. And she said, I was watching from the closet, and I had to come out the closet and light the bed from the bottom myself to get it burning. They did say that that young man had not been able to sit down for quite a while. So she did burn him. I knew she was serious. I never discounted anything she said because I grew up with her. And I paid attention.
Donna's childhood with Dante was not easy.
When she was 7 and I was in kindergarten, my mother would get these headaches and go lay down and take a nap like when I'd get home from kindergarten. And Della would stand over my mother with a pair of scissors at the back of her neck, at the nape of her neck, and tell me, if you don't do everything I say, this is what I'm gonna do to her. She also threatened to snap the baby's neck. in his crib. And she told me, you'll know that I did it if you come home from school and I've got his pacifier in my mouth. She just kept getting me. You know, she had me stand on a stool and tell me, trust me, I'm your sister. I love you. I'll catch you. Just fall back. I'm looking, and finally she talked me into trusting her. She was walking the other way when I hit the ground. So it's like, dang, she got me again.
Darryl's most paranoid fears turn out to be true.
Thanks a million.
And he's afraid for his life.
To get rejected infuriated her to the utmost. That was when, well, even if somebody didn't come home on time, to her, that was rejection. To reject her, you were putting your life on the line.
She has this charming, engaging persona where she lures people in and then she destroys them. What I would say is that she's a sociopath. They want what they want when they want it. And when they don't get it, they will do anything to make the person pay.
The threat of the loss of something to which a sociopathic or narcissistic person feels entitled tends to be a dangerous realization.
Darryl is horrified. He realizes his whole world is in jeopardy and that he needs to get a divorce in a hurry.
I need to get papers done.
He came to a point where he realized, oh my God, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I have married this creepy woman, this horrible woman, this poser, who has this horrendous past. And I never did my homework. And I have to get out of this. I have to save myself.
Darryl is terrified of what Dante will do if she discovers he is inquiring about divorce. He requests that his lawyer draw up paperwork and get it ready to be signed. But Darryl will never show up for the meeting. By early February 1996, having discovered his wife Dante's frightening past, Daryl Sutorius realizes he urgently needs to get out of the marriage. But still, he stays. He doesn't want to lose another house in a divorce, even temporarily.
The thought of losing another house was just something he couldn't deal with. And that's why he was staying there. I said, Daryl, get the heck out of there. You know, if you really are afraid for your life, get out.
Daryl's shocking discovery that his wife is not only 4 times divorced, but also potentially a killer, had to have literally left him panic-stricken. And yet, what we see is that he's still trying to weigh out his options. He's so worried about this second divorce and losing his prized possessions that he stays.
He should have immediately gone into flight mode, but he doesn't. And I think that that is reflective of probably how he felt for having really not gotten to know her better.
Hoping to expedite the divorce, his lawyer does all the necessary paperwork, but Darryl never shows up to sign. Darryl also fails to show up to work. Nobody knows where he is, and his colleagues are frantic.
Our police dispatcher got a phone call from Dr. Sutorius' secretary, very concerned because it was a Monday morning. He didn't show up for scheduled surgery. There were numerous pages that he did not answer throughout the weekend.
Immediately, they knew something was wrong. Daryl doesn't behave that way. The fact that there's no phone call, there's nothing, it's completely out of character for him.
The police are dispatched to the Sutorious house to look for the missing heart surgeon.
So that officer, along with another officer, went over to the Sutorious residence and knocked on the door. And Adela answered. And initially, she said he was at work. And they informed her, no, she's not at work. The secretary called the police concerned because he wasn't there. He didn't even show up for a scheduled surgery. And she said, oh, well, then he's away on a weekend trip. Are you sure he's not here? Well, you're welcome to come in and check the garage. So she kind of led him into the garage area to where his car was, and they found his car in the garage.
And then they hear a scream coming from the basement. They get to the top of the stairs, and they can smell there's a dead body in the basement. And they go down there, and there's the crime scene, and she's shaking him, trying to wake him up, and yelling at him, and telling them, you know, get him to wake him up. What's the matter with him? Their first reaction was that this guy killed himself because of the way the scene was.
When she first found her husband dead in the basement, she convinced police that, oh my God, I am horrified. This is the worst nightmare for me. My husband killed himself.
She was just hysterical, and they took her upstairs to remove her from the scene to calm her down, to try to calm her down.
Dante claims that her husband must have committed suicide as a result of their financial and marital problems. Then she does something really strange.
But you know what she said, what she yelled at him when they were carrying his body out of the house? Are you mad at me, Darryl? What does that mean? Are you mad at me, Darryl?
This is a very puzzling case for law enforcement because they know that he's larger than she is, that women don't tend to do these kind of violent acts as often as men.
Darryl has a history of suicidal ideation and depression, and we know that that can recur. It doesn't have to, but it can.
So it does make a case for the fact that he did kill himself.
Darryl's friend Richard immediately contacts the police with another version of events.
I was just shocked. It was something beyond my realm of belief, you know, or anything I had ever experienced. I got a hold of a detective out there, and I said, I know who killed him. And he said, yeah, who? And I said, well, his wife, Della, or Dante, or whatever she goes by. And he said, well, how do you know that? And I said, he told me to tell you that if something happened to him, that's what happened. He would never have committed suicide with a gun. He would have figured out some cocktail to take that would, you know, he'd lay down, go to sleep, and that would be it.
When Cincinnati lead investigator Tom Boeing arrives on scene, he notices something very unusual in the house.
It looked like he lived in the lower level. Dante was living on the second floor in a small bedroom with a big lock on the door, which was just filled with unpacked clothing. In the search of her room, in between the mattress and the box springs, we found a pair of steak knives.
An inspection of the blood spatter at the crime scene raises suspicions.
He could not have shot himself in this manner and for the blood to end up where it did on him and on the couch.
Tom believes the evidence points to murder. Darryl's children are in shock, but uncertain how to proceed, they schedule a memorial service and invite Dante. She doesn't attend, and when the autopsy results come in, the police get ready to make an arrest.
Who walks out of their house in the late afternoon, early evening, in a bathrobe to be taken to the jail?
Daryl Sutorius is found dead in his basement. His wife Dante says it was suicide. The police think otherwise.
His feet were on the floor, his legs were dangling, were up against the couch, the edge of the couch, covering part of the couch. Well, there was blood underneath that. When they moved his body out, there was blood on the side of the couch, the front edge of the couch, the cushion, which could not have gotten there if he had died in that position. So that led them to believe that the body had been moved after the shot.
The autopsy results do not support Dante's version of events.
The coroner went to the scene, and the first thing that he noticed was the wound wasn't right. The wound was from back to front, and it was not a contact wound. And that's very unusual. I mean, most suicides are to the temple or in the mouth, and now lately in the chest, in the heart. So this was right away, he had a problem with the cause of death being suicide.
Police obtain an arrest warrant, and Dante is charged with the aggravated murder of her husband, Daryl Sutorius.
Unbelievable. Hollywood could not have written this. Who walks out of their house in the late afternoon, early evening, in a bathrobe to be taken to the jail, to be booked for your husband's murder? It was a singular story.
Looking for answers, Donna visits her sister in jail.
There's this thing between me and Darryl, and she shows herself to me. I did ask, is she behind glass, by the way, when I went to visit. I'm like, is she like behind some thick glass there? Because I don't know how mad she is at me right now, and she's killed at least once. We know it, well, this one, okay? She wasn't making sense. It's like she had all this story in her, excuses, reasons, the whole thing that she built up in her head. I don't know what she was trying to explain away, but she kept blaming my mother. I've never burned people up and killed them, or, you know, we were all raised by the same mother.
She has a cluster of personality traits that we actually do clinically cluster. We call them cluster B. If you think about selfishness taken to the extreme, narcissism taken to the extreme being sociopathy, you could see two of them there.
Is Dante's case for suicide compelling enough to convince a jury of her innocence? The onus is on the prosecution team to prove beyond a doubt that a murder has taken place.
All we need is one juror to buy that story. And we don't get a conviction, we get a hung jury, which is a victory for them, because then we'd have to do this whole thing over again, you see?
On May 20th, 1996, the first-degree murder trial of Dante Sutorius for the murder of her husband, Darryl, begins. Dante pleads not guilty and is adamant about her innocence. Her style of dress in the courtroom is described as demure.
She had her little cotton dress on. She had a rotation of dresses that she wore, and very prim and proper, and just someone that you would not think and you wouldn't be afraid of. You wouldn't think twice about talking to her.
She looked like this fragile China doll, demure, sophisticated. I think that's what she wanted to project.
The defense argues that Darryl killed himself. They claim that his erratic behavior leading up to his death, including threats to his wife, clearly point towards suicide. And that there's substantial evidence proving that Darryl decided to end his own life.
He was middle-aged, overweight, had some health problems. He had sought psychiatric counseling, that he was on an antidepressant medication. The murder was actually far less likely than suicide.
Who couldn't buy that? He was in another relationship that didn't work, and now a new marriage, and right away there are problems. Who wouldn't be depressed?
There was some, air of truth that they talked about. His psychiatrist had talked to him about suicide, or he had talked to his psychiatrist about suicide. And so in every big lie, there's a strain of truth. Has to be, or else you would never believe it. And in this, there was some strain of truth in what they said.
He is in a bad marriage. This would be his second divorce. He could be very, very down about that. He does tend to have anger issues, and he could turn that anger inward towards himself. He could blame himself for being deceived by a woman and headed towards a second divorce.
The defense even goes so far as to say that Darryl set up his wife to take the fall for his suicide.
I don't think he was consciously thinking, I'm going to frame her for murder, but I think he wanted everybody to know it was her fault. If in fact he was going to commit suicide, I think he would have wanted that, yes.
Defense attorney Croswell also rejects the prosecution's theory that the blood spatter on the couch is clear indication of murder. In part because they have forgotten to take into account Darryl's dog, Teddy.
Their theory was that the little dog, Teddy, was responsible for the blood that was on the side of the couch. And that, isn't it possible that Teddy lapped up blood and he got his face all covered with blood, that he rolled in it or did something and then shook himself? Well, Croswell demonstrates this for the jury in his closing argument. He takes a big drink of water and he sprays water all over the podium in front of the jury. That was pretty bizarre.
The defense closes by asking what they believe to be a critical question. If he was so fearful for his life, why was he still living at home?
Obviously felt comfortable enough that he sat down, had a glass of wine, and laid down on the couch to sleep while she was in the house, which doesn't exactly fit the idea of someone who is terrified that this person is going to kill them.
The prosecution counters that Darryl was afraid for his life and plays a message from Darryl to his daughter Deborah in the courtroom.
One of the most chilling moments of the trial, absolutely, was the phone recording that Dr. Sutorius left on his daughter's voicemail.
Don't talk to Dante. If you and I talk, just keep it between the two of us. Please, don't do this to me. I may not live through this. I'm serious. Please don't do it.
It was the voice of a dead man predicting his demise. It was chilling. When they played that, you could have heard a pin drop in the courtroom. Everybody was spellbound. He was crying. Daryl Sutorius was crying for help in that voicemail, and Deborah could do nothing about it. Imagine that. I mean, being a daughter, knowing your father's in a state that you wouldn't wish for anyone and being unable to do anything about it. I imagine that stays with Deborah to this day.
The prosecution claims that Dante carefully plans her husband's murder because he was worth more to her dead than alive.
To take his life while she is still married to him and make it look like a suicide, she'd be a lot better off. If he dies, she gets his profit sharing and the life insurance policy, which amounted to over $1 million.
Still, the prosecution worries that someone on the jury might be convinced by the suicide theory.
I remember looking at the jury, and I kind of was thinking, are these people smart enough to see this, and that worried me. That was one of the reasons that I thought she might get away with it, is that maybe she had hoodwinked these jurors too.
That was the fear, that someone might bite on that. That he could have, not that he did, but that he could have, was all they needed. just wanted to grab onto that. And they hit it hard.
Della is a very talented manipulator, and I would be concerned that if she killed him, she would be working very diligently on not only her story, but how to weave her way out of anything that anyone asked her.
The jury doesn't buy Dante's story that Darryl has committed suicide.
Della Dante Sutorius, guilty of aggravated murder.
On June 7th, 1996, after only 5 hours of deliberation, they return a verdict of guilty. Dante Sutorius is sentenced to life in prison and is branded a notorious Black Widow.
It was like shock because, yes, it is true. And it was a relief because finally it's over. I knew it was coming. And throughout the years, just randomly, the thought would come to my head, I wonder whose life Dell is ruining now. Because that's what she had been building up to all her life. And so it's like, in the back of my mind somewhere, there was still that dread, that doom, that one day doomsday is going to come. One day she is going to do what she has vowed to do.
I think overestimating her ability to play the shocked, aggrieved, deeply saddened wife of a suicidal physician, and it finally caught up with her. But she had a long history of successes, which I think caused her to overestimate her manipulative powers.
Della's guilt is a combination of two factors. It's her backstory, that she has a history of attempting to kill other men, in addition to the forensic evidence that was found at the crime scene.
I thought afterwards that, well, doggone it, they did know. They could see through her. And I mean, she was there in this little dress, you know, that made her look like, you know, the mother of all children and this and that and the other thing. And they were able to see through that. So that was a pure vindication as far as I was concerned.
Darryl's family and friends feel that justice has been served.
They were relieved. They felt vindicated. They felt like she had finally learned her lesson in that finally somebody had seen through her stories.
I remember hearing the verdict, and I was sitting in the car. I was in a parking lot of some restaurant, I think, and when they said guilty, I felt a great sense of relief at that. I know my kids, especially my youngest daughter, was always worried that my testimony was going to cause her to come back and seek me out at some point, you know, and it was just pure joy of knowing that Darryl was vindicated.
14 years later, after exhausting every possibility of appeal, Dante Sutorius dies in the Marysville Women's Prison at the age of 60 of natural causes, 3 years before her first eligible parole hearing in 2013.
Della Dante Hall Sutorius got what she was looking for. She got everything she said she was going to have all her life. She got what she worked up to. She had the nice big house. She had a Jag, which we heard about often. She had, you know, the good clothes, the furs. All she had to do, instead of killing the man, was love the man. That's all you got to do, be human. And she couldn't.
Love is blind, they say. Perhaps he was blinded by her charming abilities, but at the end of the day, you're gonna marry somebody. You really have to have a checkpoint, a cross-check on who that person really is. And I think that's the lesson here.
He was unique. He was just, I mean, I don't know how to explain that to you, that he was just somebody you just enjoyed being around. I sometimes sit down and I'm, you know, when I don't have anything to do and think about what all happened and wonder how in the world did that ever happen.
I would give anything if he could have called me. As well as, you know, at the time he was calling my mother, if he would have called me. If he would have listened to me, he'd be alive right now. I would have, yes, it would. And I've thought about that a lot. Darryl should have, sorry. Darryl should have fled for his life. He should not have stayed. He should have followed his gut.
Well, I felt stupid, first of all, that I couldn't have figured that out and then done something more. And it just a great sense of loss. I think a million things could have been done by a million different people, including me, and but we didn't. So, and that's just it. I wish he was here.